What up, Cavs Nation? I'm your host, Ethan Sands, and I'm back with another episode of the Wine and Gold Talk podcast. And joining me today, alongside Chris Fedor, of course, the lovely Ashley Bastock, coming to us as we have the regular season finale for the Cleveland Cavaliers. They came away with their 18th loss of the year, 126-118, as a meltdown happened in the second half. But we are not here to talk to you guys about this particular game, as there was no value given for the Cavs unless you're looking at the future. And we're going to talk about the future, but one that is much more close than an Imani Bates starting lineup that fans might be hoping for. So, Cleveland, we know that the Cavs will host the first round of the playoffs, but we do not know who they will play against. Orlando, Chicago, Miami, and Atlanta are the four candidates for opponents that they could face. But it's more about how the Cavs internally feel going into the playoffs. They're healthy for the first time going into a playoffs since what feels like forever. Remember last year, Dean Wade was hurt. Donovan Mitchell was dealing with the lingering knee injury. Now, everybody's good to go as of now. Knock on wood. Don't want to jinx it. Knock on whatever you have to. Chris, at the end of the season, the Cavs are 64-18. What defines success for this team going into the playoffs?
Beating Boston. Getting to the NBA Finals. They're the number one seed in the Eastern Conference. 64-18. Nearly matched the franchise best for a single season for win total, right? Was throughout the course of the season, they were right on the doorstep of some of the most legendary regular season teams that we've ever seen in NBA history. The old Bulls, the Milwaukee Bucks, the Golden State Warriors, the Boston Celtics from the mid-'80s, the Los Angeles Lakers as well. That's the company that they were in for a majority of the season, and they didn't sustain that in the second half. They didn't have a very good March, and now they fell short of even getting to 66, which is the franchise mark. But it's still a championship-level team. Everything about their profile points to them being a championship-level team. They're top 10 in offense and defense. They're one of the few teams in the NBA with that. They've got the number one offense in the NBA. Historically, one of the best offenses that we've ever seen. Evan Mobley's a different player. Darius Garland's a different player. They both had all-star caliber seasons. Donovan Mitchell took a step from a leadership standpoint. Kenny Atkinson is a better in-game adjuster. He's a better tactician. He's a better X's and O's guy than what they had with JB Bickerstaff. So, and as you said, Ethan, they're healthy. So there's no reason to me why anybody in Cleveland and anybody inside the organization should feel good about anything other than getting to the NBA Finals. That's the standard that they should have. That's obviously the goal that they have, is getting to the finals and winning a championship. But that's the standard that they should set for themselves. Because when you're the number one seed, there's a different level of pressure. There's a different level of expectation. There's a different level of what is defined as success. And I know that, for a majority of this time, when the Kobe Altman-led front office was here and they were going through the rebuild, then they brought in Donovan Mitchell, it was always, let's take the next step. And they didn't define what the next step was, but they always said, let's take the next step. So if you're going off of that, the next logical step is get to the conference finals. But the status quo changed throughout the course of the season. So to me, the next step for this group is showing that they can beat Boston, the looming threat that exists in the Eastern Conference. The team that they went out and got DeAndre Hunter to better match up against. And yes, there are other teams in the Eastern Conference that they were thinking about as well. But for them, it's all about Boston. It's all about proving. Kenny Atkinson even said it the other night in his postgame when he was talking about, is there a belief level in our own locker room? Do these guys think that they can beat Boston? He said Boston and Indiana specifically. That should tell you what is front of mind when it comes to the Cavs and who they believe their biggest threats are in the Eastern Conference.
And Ashley, is it weird thinking about a team that has had all these accolades, 64-18, broken so many franchise records, separated themselves from the LeBron James era in multiple different ways in the regular season. But now we turn to a team that is hungry, is competitive, is looking to make more of a mark in the second portion of the season as we know it in the playoffs. What is your perspective on this team and how they're still not satisfied with where they're at?
Well, I think they shouldn't be satisfied. And it's funny because we have this discussion about the Browns all the time. And it was actually like a big discussion heading into the 2024 season specifically, that sometimes when we'd be around them, it felt like there was this, swagger and attitude that, like, okay, it can be good to have that in professional sports, but it was like the cockiness of a team that hasn't done anything yet, that failed in winning one playoff game the year prior. So I actually am not surprised the Cavs have this attitude. I really like that they have this attitude because this group has not been to a finals together. They have not even made an extended run. They had to battle hard in that first series last year. The year before that, the Knicks eliminate them in the first round, right? The year before that, they get knocked out in the play-in. Like, they've taken these small incremental steps year after year with this particular group post LeBron, but they haven't made that extended run. They haven't beaten Boston to make it to the finals yet. So I kind of love that they're going about it this way because it's great. Like Kenny Atkinson said today, it's great to get through the grind of 82 games and to get out of it healthy, most importantly. But they have not made that postseason run yet that can really define guys' careers and change their lives and change their trajectories. So I think it's not surprising to me that they have this attitude because they're a good team, and I think good teams approach the postseason this way.
Yeah, there's certainly a humility to them, right? But there's also a confidence, and I think they have found that balance that you need to have. They should be confident, right? Like I said, they have all the accolades, they have all these different records, and they have, the statistical profile of a championship contending team. They have proven that they can reach that particular, they can play to that level. Now they just have to do it on the postseason stage. But it's a combination of humility and confidence. And at the very least, the thing that I'll say is being around this team this year and being around this team last year, the feeling around this team last year was, oh, damn, what happens if we don't beat Orlando? And oh, by the way, like, we could lose to Orlando. That is a legitimate possibility. That is an outcome that is realistic for us. And if we do lose to Orlando, like, what happens? That's doomsday. Like, JB gone. What happens with the front office? Do they break up the front office? What happens with the combination of Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell? What's the future of Jarrett Allen? So there were all those things that were like looming over this team of what happens if we lose against Orlando? Yes, but we actually could lose against Orlando, so this could be our reality. And now going into this, it's like, doesn't matter who we play in the first round. We are superior to that team. We are significantly better than that team, and it shouldn't be a long testing series the way that Orlando was. Like, the Cavs have taken the regular season leap that they needed to take, and they have shown a lot of growth in a lot of different areas where, like, it's no longer a coin flip series going into the first round, right? It's legitimately, they will be favored in every single game that they play, and they will win the series. It's just a matter of how long does it go.
And Chris, you mentioned the word humility, and I'm thinking about how Kenny Atkinson worded it in his post-game press conference, talking about the leadership style of Donovan Mitchell. It's confident, but there's also humility built in there, right? And for the fans that are listening and being like, well, Donovan Mitchell didn't play in the last 4 games of the regular season. What do you mean they're healthy going into the playoffs? Well, Donovan Mitchell went through an extensive workout before the game tonight, even though he did not play. He also went through a workout yesterday as well. So we got to see a couple of different things from Donovan Mitchell. Kenny Atkinson has described the injury as mild, He said that he'll practice during the week when they get to full inter-squad practices. That'll happen as well. He'll be a full participant in all of those things, barring any setbacks. So I definitely think it's important to note that Donovan Mitchell didn't play, but also that there's no worry in how he'll start the playoffs. So, Chris, knowing all of these things, I think the most important player is going to be Donovan Mitchell, playoff spider, right? Say that, and who's going to lead them to where they want to go. But the players that need to step up the most and have the most eyeballs on them, Evan Mobley and Darius Garland. Who do you feel like is the most important player going into the playoffs, and who needs to step up in all these things?
To me, it's Evan Mobley. I think we're getting closer to a reality with the Cavs of Evan being their most important player and their best player. And so much of this season was about Evan Mobley. It was getting him to believe that he was the man, or he could be the man. It was empowering him in different situations. It was putting the ball in his hands in different situations. It was allowing him to play with a level of freedom and confidence, without limitations, without restrictions, without trying to put him in some kind of box. And when you get into a 7-game playoff series, and this is no disrespect to Donovan Mitchell. Donovan Mitchell is a great player. He is arguably a top 10 player in the NBA. He's probably going to be on a lot of people's MVP ballots. But when you get into a 7-game playoff series, the guys that look and play like Evan Mobley are the ones that are better equipped to swing a playoff series. Historically, that's what you've seen, more so than somebody like Donovan Mitchell. And I think the playoffs can be hard on a guy like Donovan. I think the playoffs can be hard on a guy like Darius. Evan needs to play with an aggressiveness. He needs to play with a force. In the words of Tristan Thompson following today's game, good Evan is not good enough. The Cavs need Evan Mobley to be great, to do what they want to do. And Donovan Mitchell knows that. Darius Garland knows that. Kenny Atkinson knows that. That's why at the end of Game 5 last year in Boston in the Eastern Conference semifinals, in a private moment, that's why Donovan Mitchell went up to Evan Mobley, patted him on the chest, and said, "That's who you are. That's who you need to be." Because in that Game 5, even though it was a loss against Boston, sharing the court with Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum and Drew Holiday and Derek White, all-stars, NBA champions, future Hall of Famers, Evan Mobley looked like one of those. And Donovan recognized then, just like the organization did, that that could be the future of the Cavs, and that could be the future of Evan Mobley. So whether it's round 1 and they're playing against Bam, or it's the second round and they're playing against Pascal Siakam, or it's the conference finals and he's playing against his kryptonite and Kristaps Porzingis, like the challenge of Evan Mobley, now that he is an all-star, there's a pressure that comes with that. There's an expectation that comes with that. There's a responsibility that comes with that. When you reach a certain stature in the NBA, and Evan's going to be on an all-NBA team. He is. But when you reach that stature, it can't be a sometimes thing. It can't, especially in the playoffs. So if they get great all-star caliber Evan Mobley at both ends of the floor, then the Cavs have a legitimate chance to win a championship. That's how responsible I think he is for their success during this playoff run. Because when teams are going to put 2 on Donovan, or they're going to put 2 on Darius, or they're going to try and muck up the game, make it physical, try and take the Cavs out of their offensive rhythm, like the different outlet that they're supposed to have this year, aside from just going pick and roll, is Evan Mobley. Evan Mobley being a more advanced offensive player. And he has to do that consistently throughout this playoff run against, defenses that are more geared to try and take away his strengths and try and exploit his weaknesses on the offensive end of the floor.
Chris, I think it's immensely important that Evan Mobley is such an even keel player already. right? You don't get to see the emotion all the time from him. And this season as a whole has been about building up his confidence because Donovan Mitchell said, I'll take the spotlight for now, but when the playoffs come, you will be under this microscope. And everybody will be watching every single move that you make. So we need you to have the confidence, good or bad, that you can turn it around and be able to have success. Ashley, I wanted to ask you this about Evan Mobley and Darius Garland because Tristan Thompson in his interview said DG and Evan need to be good, need to be great, not just good. When you talk about a guy in Evan who you can't tell whether he's upset, whether he's mad, whether he's happy, whether whatever, you just understand that he's going to play the game of basketball to his best ability. I think DG is kind of on the other end of that spectrum where he's a guy, you can see his emotions. He wears his heart on his sleeve. And if he's having a bad game, I feel like not only the entire arena feels it, but the team feels it too, because his energy is not the same. And that's why I've said this to Jimmy and Chris at length, that when DG had that poor March, when he was going through his little lull, he was still having fun. His energy was still high. And I think that was important for Evan Mobley to be that cool, calm, and collected guy. Do you think that helps him when it comes to handling the pressure that is going to come his way in this extremely important playoffs?
I do. To me, that's kind of Evan's superpower as a basketball player on top of his length and athleticism that we see, because I think you just talk about these 7-game series winner go home scenarios. There's no way to replicate them than by experiencing them. I think playoff like atmosphere is maybe the most over and misused phrase in all of professional sports. Like, there's no real way to replicate it, right? So for me, like, I think it's part of what makes him who he is. And at times with Darius, like you see it with Darius, right? I think throughout his career, and especially throughout the early years of his career when they were bad, and you would see that frustration with him, I think, take over. And I think sometimes he's had a tendency to get trapped in that. And with Evan, it's just not the same thing. So, I mean, to everything Chris was saying about why this is so important for him, like, I think in order to accomplish that, I'm sure he's going to accomplish it at some point, right? Like, he's too good not to. But his demeanor and the way he's even keeled, and I always think of the Ted Lasso thing, like the goldfish brain, right? Like, you can make a mistake and just move on. Like, a lot of basketball players in particular, I think they struggle with that in general, that not being able to move on, and you harp on the last play and you're not as into the next play. And I think with Evan not having a tendency to do that, that's going to be big for him. And it's a big part of why he's an all-star this year too.
Chris, what do you think about that emotional bridge, that emotional understanding of what kind of player you are and how that can wreck your game, especially in a playoff environment with so many eyes on you? I know Darius is going to have to monitor this and continue to fight throughout whatever performance he has, because as you mentioned, there are opponents that could give Darius problems. And sure, it was great to see him have a great performance against the New York Knicks, a team that has historically given him issues, but I think there's still a need for him to prove himself. Evan Mobley, you can look back to last year and be like, oh, we had a game where we can say that we're expecting Evan Mobley to play to this level. I don't think there's that level of expectation for Darius Garland. I think there's a need, but I don't think there's people out there that are like, oh yeah, I can unequivocally say that Darius is going to translate what he did in the regular season to the playoffs.
Yeah, I think there remains to be questions about, Darius Garland and his readiness for everything that playoff basketball is. Because I think if we're being honest, Darius has struggled throughout the course of his career and at times this year. Even this year was an all-star caliber season for him, but there were times that he struggled with physicality. There were times that he struggled with guys that wanted to, grab him and push him and, force a switch against him and then post him up and stuff like that. You know what I mean? And that's what playoff basketball is. That's what playoff basketball is going to be. And there was an interesting moment last year in the first round series against the Magic where, Jalen Suggs was in Darius's jersey. And it almost felt like a little bit of a moment of fakeness from Darius where Like he pounded Jalen Suggs on the chest and kind of had this attitude of like, yeah, keep going at me. Bring it some more. And I just remember Jalen Suggs going back to the bench and he had this look of, I got him. I got him. Like I took him out of his game in a way. And look, you're going to get away with a little bit more as a defensive player in a playoff environment. And Darius is going to have to figure out how to fight through that, both physically and mentally. And the other thing, and we've talked about this on the podcast, but it's something like opposing offenses are going to target Darius. The Cavs are ready for it. Kenny Atkinson is ready for it. Darius says he's ready for it. But this is a switch-heavy defense, and teams are going to go pick and roll, and they're going to put Darius in the action over and over and over again, and they're going to see how the Cavs handle that. And they're going to see if the Cavs are willing to switch. And they're going to see if they can find what they think is an advantageous matchup going up against Darius. That is exhausting. It's going to be exhausting for Darius, both mentally and physically. Like feeling like you're a target of the opponent over and over and over again, ruthlessly and relentlessly. That's something that he's going to have to learn to deal with. That's something that he's going to have to accept. And is he ready for that? I guess we're about to find out, right? I'm not saying that I know how Darius is going to respond. I'm not saying that I'm predicting failure for him or anything along those lines, but it's a legitimate question. Because if you think back to 10 years ago when the Cavs were in the NBA Finals against the historic Golden State Warriors, their plan was to wear down Steph. Their plan was to attack Steph. Their plan was to try and get Steph off the floor by getting him in foul trouble and just making him guard over and over and over again. And they felt like over the course of that series, he was going to wear down both physically and mentally. And over the course of any 7-game series, the opponent's going to hope that Darius Garland wears down. And they feel like if they put that level of pressure on him when he's on the defensive end of the floor, is he going to have the same kind of energy? Is he going to have the same kind of enthusiasm? Is he going to have the same kind of juice to be the offensive dynamo that he can be? So the responsibility that he's going to have on defense is going to crank up to a significant level. And can he answer that challenge while also being the kind of dynamic offensive player and as heavily involved on the offensive end of the floor as he's going to need to be? Because it's going to be exhausting for him. It is. It's just a different kind of game when you get into the playoffs. And I'm very, very curious to see how he handles what is going to be a new reality for him.
Actually, we've gotten into the nitty-gritty on Evan Mobley and Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell, obviously. But out of those, the core four, who do you think is going to have the biggest impact in a 7-game series when it comes to this Cleveland Cavaliers team? Because we know this is going to be Kenny Atkinson's first time coaching the Cavs in the playoffs. He's saying he's going to start every series with 10-man rotation. And we've had a lot of different moments from role players, bench players who have come and helped the Cavs win games, sometimes even save them in those situations. Who do you think is the player to look for outside of the core four to make the most of a splash in this year's postseason?
Well, not to hijack the conversation, but I did want to have like a Jarrett Allen discussion really quick because I keep thinking about him. And maybe because this is like the only thing that's worth mentioning from today's the game, the fact that he played in all 82 games officially for the first time in his career. He played 41 whole seconds today, and thank God he arguably should have played less and would have played less in a perfect scenario. Chris wrote about it in his game story, exactly how it went down. But like, to me, thinking about where Jarrett Allen was a year ago, and in each of these postseasons he's been in Cleveland, he's struggled with some injury, but all of the drama surrounding the rib and how the rib was handled, and a teammate in Marcus Morris Sr. saying after the fact, well, I would have played through a bruised rib, and here it wasn't a bruised rib. It was a broken rib. And Jarrett, isn't that interview with you, or Chris, isn't that interview with Jarrett with you where he was like, that piece of the bone is probably still floating around in my body somewhere back in
Yeah.
September. Like, I just keep thinking about that Jarrett Allen from a year ago and how much fire he came under. Wrongfully, I think, in hindsight, in a lot of cases, and people questioning his toughness, his want to, his desire, all these intangibles, on top of a guy who, for the previous 2 years, I would argue, people were questioning, was he going to get out physical by basically any other big man they were going to come against, especially after that Knicks series 2 years ago. That was really, I think, the narrative coming out. So I think we've talked about the other three guys, but this postseason, I would argue, is almost as important for Jarrett Allen as it is for Evan Mobley in terms of stepping up and changing. For Jarrett, more so, it's changing the narrative that has kind of dogged him these last 2 years in particular. But like, I just think while it's not the same exact role as Evan Mobley, and I don't think it's the same exact influence, this is a big stepping stone for him. And I think he could do a lot in terms of obviously helping this team, given his athleticism, given how he can play vertically in a way that a lot of big men struggle with doing efficiently without fouling. Evan's obviously very good at it too. To show that he can be physical and to remain, knock on wood, healthy. He's managed to do it this year and play in all 82 games. But I just keep thinking where he was a year ago, and I think he has the real opportunity not just to help this team, but to change a lot of the narratives about him.
And he felt like he was playing his best basketball last year in the playoffs against Orlando. He was dominating Orlando. He was doing everything that people thought that he couldn't do, showing a level of toughness, showing a ferocity, overwhelming some of the players for the Orlando Magic. And he has said on record, like, that was the best basketball that I've ever played in my life. And he was robbed of the chance of being able to finish off that series. The other thing, and why it's so important, I think, is because, Kenny believes in the two big combination. And I think there are people inside this organization, including Kenny, that feel like one of the great advantages that the Cavs are going to have going into any playoff series is that other teams in the NBA don't have two of those guys. They don't. Having both of those guys together and being able to see it fit and work, that is an advantage that the Cavs can have. There are some teams that are going to have a really, really difficult time from a matchup perspective trying to figure out how to deal with both of them, right? When it's just one on the floor, it's a problem. It's difficult, but it's easier to match that. You know what I mean? So I think the Cavs are committed to playing Jarrett and Evan together, not for the entire game, obviously, but for long stretches. And they've got enough data to back it up. Look, in 71 games together, Jarrett Allen and Evan Mobley, with those two guys on the floor, the Cavs outscored teams by 12.2 points per 100 possessions. That's in more than 1,000 minutes together. That is a distinct advantage that the Cavs have going into any playoff series. And they need to maximize that as best they can. And that means that, Jarrett has to be effective. That means that Jarrett and Evan together have to be effective at the same time. And the Cavs have to be able to function at the highest levels that they need to on the offensive end with both of them on the floor. The expansion that Evan Mobley has made in his own game, where he's more comfortable out on the perimeter, where he's more comfortable operating inverted pick and rolls, where he's not occupying the same space that Jarrett Allen is occupying, that helps. That helps being able to play both those guys together. But if Jarrett Allen's going to play the way that he did last year in the first round against Orlando, Kenny's going to have a really hard time justifying not giving him 34 to 38 minutes. Kenny's going to have a really hard time justifying taking Jarrett and Evan out of the lineup at the same time and splitting those two guys up the way that he did throughout the course of the regular season. Like, a lot of the rotations are going to be similar, or at least they're going to start similar. But, those two guys together can be a difference maker for this team. And that's why Jarrett is very, very important to the Cavs' success, despite what people perceive to be problematic for him in playoff environments.
Ashley, I think to start off, I think that was a perfect way to kind of blow that question up and give probably the best answer we could have with that, because Jarrett Allen has been, as you guys both eloquently put, like substantially important to this team. But I do think that when it comes to Jarrett Allen and Evan Mobley pairing, like Chris was mentioning, it gave me a flashback to the introductory press conference with Kenny Atkinson, where he was like, "Oh yeah, it can work. I know it can work. I'm gonna make it work. I promise it's gonna work." And because everybody sitting in their media seats are like, Kenny, you just got here. We've been watching this for a couple of years now. I don't know. And then he goes and does it, right? And obviously, Chris, you've mentioned this a couple times in the meetings that Kenny Atkinson had and the interviews that he had with Kobe Altman, with the Cavs organization. There were questions about how is he going to make them to work, right? And them to fit on the floor together. And I think Kenny being able to, that's probably one of my favorite things about Kenny Atkinson this season. If he said he was going to do something at the very beginning, it ended up happening, right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of crazy to say about a first-year head coach, and then also to say that he exceeded his own expectations when coming to the regular season success.
You have to look at it this kind of way, right? So the playoffs are a chess match, and so much of it is about matchups, right? And if the Cavs are going to be committed to playing both bigs, and they're going to be effective that way at both ends of the floor, the tendency that teams are going to have is say, all right, like we got to find a way to deal with that. But they can't play two bigs as well as the Cavs play two bigs. Like that's going to be advantage Cavs. So the other tendency that they would have is say, like, we can't match that. We know we can't match that. We don't have the same personnel. Let's go small. Let's go small and see if we can take advantage of it that kind of way. That could be advantage Cavs too, because Jarrett and Evan are both really skilled. They're both athletic. They're both mobile. And then you talk about the physical advantage that having two bigs would give to the Cavs wouldn't have to match that and downsize, because stylistically, like even though they're playing two bigs, both those bigs can play against a small ball attack. So I just think like that's a big time X factor for the Cavs going into these playoffs. Like Atlanta, you want to play two bigs, you want to go with Okongwu and Mohamed Gueye or something, advantage Cavs, right? Like, yeah, Miami might try and do it with Khalil Ware and Bam Adebayo, but the Cavs' two big setup is better than Miami's two big setup. Maybe Chicago wants to try it. Well, the Cavs' two big setup is better than Chicago's two big. And then you can keep going down the list. And no matter what team you get to, with the exception of Boston, you feel like the Cavs' two bigs will be an advantage over any team that they would see up until the Eastern Conference Finals and then maybe in the NBA Finals, because some of the teams out west have some problematic duos. But that's something that, Kenny can't be afraid to stick with over and over and over and over again if it's working, and even if it's at the expense of Dean Wade minutes or if it's at the expense of DeAndre Hunter minutes.
The duality of it is if a team goes small, right, and how the Cavs are going to counteract that, and especially because you mentioned this season and how when opposing teams would go small, it was bye-bye, Jarrett Allen, see you on the bench in a couple of minutes, because the Cavs would think that they're in a number situation and they want to get more shots up, get more spacing involved, all these things. And I definitely think it's situationally based, right? If the Cavs are up in these scenarios, sure, Kenny Atkinson will feel confident to keep running out Jarrett Allen to try and put smaller guys in the paint, into the post, and run big on big actions with Evan Mobley and Jarrett Allen. Cool. But if they're down, I think Kenny Atkinson is going to be more pressured to put in another shooter, another spacer on the floor to allow the Cavs to get up more three-pointers and get out into space and create for their own shot. Because knowing Kenny Atkinson, he's very analytically driven, and if the Cavs are already down in those situations, the lead for the opposing team can only grow if they continue to space the floor on their own and use a smaller lineup. Ashley, when it comes to this Cavs team, when it comes to knowing how this Cavs team has operated in the past, do you feel like there's a fail-safe? Is there a player that you would be like, oh, I can plug that player in and it'll save most of the situations? Or do you think that Kenny Atkinson running with the Jarrett Allen, Evan Mobley combination, even if they're down, is strictly going to be a he needs to stick with it thing, or something else to fix the situation?
It's so hard because I think at this time of year, like, you have to rely on what works for you. And, like, yes, analytics are a part of it. Yes, matchups are a part of it. But at a certain point, you can't rely too much on that stuff. Like, you have to do what Chris is basically saying, like, what makes you, what's gotten you to this point, and try to make that a disadvantage for other teams. But remind me, the stretch a few weeks ago, like during the March stretch when they were taking Jarrett out late, was that DeAndre in place of Jarrett? Was that essentially like how it worked, and then everyone moved on? Like,
Yeah,
I mean,
it was
I think
mostly DeAndre.
yeah, like, I think that is the lineup that you would plug in theory, right? If it's obvious that the two big looks are not working, God forbid somebody gets hurt, Jarrett's struggling in some capacity. My hunch is then that DeAndre is the next sort of man up, and then you shift every guys down a spot. To me, that just, I don't know, feels like the most likely option. But I think it's kind of a problem right now that we're anticipating that there's not, thankfully for them, much evidence for. Like, I think watching Jarrett and Evan this year, and like you guys know, I watched this team from afar last year, but like, it just feels so different. And like, my biggest issue, and I remember having these conversations with people, like with Evan and Darius specifically, I'm like, God, they just seem, it was kind of maddening because in so many ways to me, they just seemed like the same players they were 2 years ago. And getting Kenny Atkinson in there this year, I think, has helped them develop more, has helped them elevate their games more. And with Evan and Jarrett in particular, it's given that pairing a new sort of life. Like, I think in that way, the coaching chains and just getting new eyes on the situation has been really key. But if you want to play around with that lineup, I think it's that DeAndre Hunter one that we were seeing late in games in March that might help you switch some things up.
I just think the important aspect is that there's another pathway that they can go if one's not working. You know, so much of the conversation over the last year and a half is you got to split up Evan Mobley and Jarrett Allen because you're losing too much on the offensive end in terms of spacing and all that kind of stuff. And, you know, Kenny obviously didn't buy into that, and the front office didn't buy into that, and they pointed to data. But that was a lot of the conversation. And when those conversations came up, I kept going to, okay, that's fine. You want to split them up, but what are you doing it for? Like, what are you gaining by doing that? If you split them up, you're either going to Marcus Morris Sr. in the past, or you're going to George, like, Dean Wade. Like, how much are you really gaining at that point? You know what I'm saying? So, like, there always had to be this situation that the Cavs were looking at saying, okay, we could split them up. We understand that we would lose a lot on the defensive end of the floor, but if we could gain offensively in a significant way, then we'd be okay with it. The difference now with this roster and the personnel that the Cavs have is, like, there's actually a potential benefit to splitting them up. The benefit is DeAndre Hunter. That's a huge difference than George Niang, right? That's a big difference than Marcus Morris Sr. at 35 years old. So that's what the Cavs have. That's what Kenny Atkinson has, is all these different options. And if he feels like he needs to go away from Jarrett and Evan together to make the offense more dynamic, to put more spacing out there, to put more three-point shooting out there, there's also this feeling of, well, DeAndre can hold up on the defensive end of the floor, so we're not losing significantly on defense either. And that's a really good place to be. And that's where, yeah, I'm with Ashley. I think, you know, DeAndre Hunter is a big-time X factor throughout the course of this Cavs playoff run because he's going to be asked to guard some of the opponent's best offensive players, because he's going to be asked to play in the lineups with just one of those bigs, whether it's Jarrett, whether it's Evan. And that means that, he's going to have to hold up his end defensively. That means he's going to have to rebound at a high level. He's going to have to do all those things that allow the Cavs to be okay on the defensive end of the floor without the protection of those two bigs together. So DeAndre Hunter certainly comes to mind because he just allows them to play a bunch of different styles offensively, a bunch of different styles defensively. He can play the 3 or the 4, maybe in some lineups. The Cavs dabbled with it toward the end of the season, maybe in some lineups, maybe against certain matchups. He might be able to play small ball 5. That's obviously circumstantial. That's obviously situational. But that level of versatility is something that the Cavs are going to be able to capitalize on in a way that they haven't been able to in the past.
Because you guys know I love giving stats. With Jarrett Allen playing in all 82 games of the season, he is the first eligible player to finish the season shooting 70% or better from the field and 70% or better from the free throw line. And as in baseball terms, Chris, that would be the founding member of the 70-70 season. Pretty good. It's pretty good.
He's also only the third player in NBA history to finish a season averaging at least 13 points per game while shooting at least 70% from the field, joining Rudy Gobert and some guy named Wilt Chamberlain, who I've read about was pretty darn good in his heyday.
Yeah, I think he had 100 points or something like that. Something about triple.
Pretty good company for Jarrett Allen.
Yeah. Chris, I will let you pick the 3 options that we have for a topic. How surprised would you be if DeAndre Hunter found his way in the starting lineup to start the playoffs? How important would Ty Jerome be coming off the bench? Or the third option, we go home and wrap the podcast up entirely.
No, I mean, I think we can touch on the first one there because I think there are merits to it. And I think it's something that Kenny is obviously going to consider as the playoffs roll around. But I look at that kind of the way that the Golden State Warriors used to look at their death lineup. They didn't start games with their death lineup. They went to it. When they felt like they needed to, they said, all right, we're putting Draymond at the 5, and we're going to put Andre Iguodala in, and you're going to have absolutely no answer for this. Now, I don't know that the Cavs have gotten to that point with DeAndre Hunter. I don't know that they have found a quote-unquote death lineup. But it doesn't feel like to me that that is a move. Changing the starting lineup is pretty significant. It is. And I don't know that that is the move that the 64-win 1 seed makes going into the first round of the playoffs against whoever it may be. Atlanta, Chicago, Miami, Orlando. That is a move that you keep in your back pocket for when you absolutely need it. But you certainly don't change your starting lineup going into game 1 of the playoffs. That is, to me, a non-starter of a conversation. But, yes, I think that DeAndre, how much does he play alongside the core 4? I think that becomes more of a conversation as the playoffs advance and as the Cavs, see different caliber teams than what they're going to see in the first round.
Just so it makes sense for Cavs fans, speaking of net rating, the core 4 plus DeAndre Hunter has a net rating of 18.5 per 100 possessions over 39 minutes played together this season. Extremely small sample size. But when you also look at the lineup of Max Strus alongside the core 4, he's played 243 minutes with that group, and they have a net rating of 12.5 points per 100 possessions, better than opposing teams when that lineup's on the floor. Ashley, I'll end with this. I know Max Strus doesn't get a whole lot of credit for the work that he does because it can be nasty, it can be on the boards, it can be spacing the floor. When you see that starting lineup on the floor together and Max Strus as a key piece of it, to be very fair, what do you think and how do you think it will fare in the playoffs? Or do you think they'll more than likely use that as a starting unit, but then go to somebody else when the time has called upon it.
You know, I think it kind of depends on how that unit does and how these games go. I mean, I'm with Chris. I wouldn't change it right now just because that would feel like change for the sake of change. And I think in that way, what you alluded to, Chris, like you show your cards too early. Like you can't make a move like that now or a week from now, as of us recording this, and have it pay off in the long term. Like it's a long road to get to the finals and to win a championship. And that is the kind of move that needs to be broken out at the right time. I mean, right now, when I watch that starting lineup, they look in sync together, most importantly. They're, for the most part, I've had to watch them even through the month of March, really in person, and most of my going to games when it has been sort of rough. I mean, they were 11-5 in the month of March, and we talk about that being bad, a bad month for them. It was, but it's funny that like even their bad month, they finished 11-5. Like this was not a dog days of January scenario for this team still, and it was the worst basketball they played essentially. So that being said, like I think when you have guys working together, and you know Max Strus to me, like he does what you need him to do, and he's an important part of that lineup. He doesn't need all of the glory in that lineup, and he's a key cog right now, and he helps those other guys, I think, be the best versions of themselves when I watch him. So I think you don't want to mess with it. It's just my biggest thing. Like I would not touch it yet. Don't fix something when it's not broken. Don't make a silly move like that too early. It has to be at the right time.
Here's the other thing, Ethan and Ashley. It works. It's a good freaking lineup.
Right.
Like there's this idea that it just doesn't work or something like that. Or like there's another lineup out there that is going to be significantly better. Maybe. But we have seen it work over and over and over again. Those five together have a net rating of 12.3. The best team in the NBA was Oklahoma City, and they had a net rating of 12.7. Think about that. So it's one thing if Max doesn't fit with the core four. It's another thing if that lineup sucks and the numbers say that it sucks. But it doesn't. There's a reason why they went out 2 years ago and they signed Max Strus, because they needed the things that he brings to the table. They still need those things. They still benefit from those things. There's still a significant purpose that he has on this basketball team. And oh, by the way, on top of all of that, on top of the movement, the cutting, the floor spacing, the quick trigger, the two-man game that he can play with Donovan Mitchell or Darius Garland, the two-man game that he can play with Jarrett Allen or Evan Mobley. Like, you can't ignore any of those things. But on top of all of that, beyond Tristan Thompson, nobody has been to the level that Max Strus has been to. Nobody has the playoff experience on this team that Max Strus does, beyond Tristan Thompson. Nobody has had the playoff success that Max Strus has had beyond Tristan Thompson on this team. That matters. That's helpful. That's something that the Cavs like about Max. They know. They know what they're going to get from him. And it may not be the same points every single night, and it may not be the same number of made threes every single night, or the same number of made shots, period, every single night. But they know what they're going to get from Max, and they know the value that he brings to not just the team, but that starting five. His skill set, as Ashley said, blends great with the starting five. And you know what? DeAndre Hunter's skill set works coming off the bench because it allows him more freedom. It allows him more touches. It allows him to be more involved on the offensive end of the floor. It allows him to be a little bit higher in the offensive pecking order, where they can take advantage of the things that make DeAndre a weapon. There's a reason. There's a reason why Atlanta decided that they were going to make him a sixth man, and they were going to bring him off the bench for a majority of the season before the Cavs even traded for him, because they thought that that was best for them, and they thought that was going to be best for DeAndre. And guess what? It was. In both cases, DeAndre's never had a year like this. This is a career year. He's in the conversation for sixth man of the year for a reason. And I think the Cavs, they benefit from a guy like that coming off the bench where you can rely on what you're going to get from him coming off the bench. There is no rule in this world that your best 5 players or your most important 5 players have to start every single game for you.
Again, looking at stats and they're throwing me off. One, I think you said for the Max Strus lineup, it has a net rating of 12.3. I think what I'm looking at on NBA.com, it says 12.5. Obviously.
Oh my God, are you really going to talk about
a 0.2 difference? It just puts it even closer to the OKC Thunder, right? Even closer. I'm just trying to make sure. But the other thing that is weirding me out right now, I'm looking at the ESPN's stats for DeAndre Hunter, and it says he played 37 games with the Hawks and 27 games with the Cavs. That would put him 1 game short of the 65.
Doesn't matter. Sixth man of the year does not have the stipulation.
Thank you for clarifying. Mm-hmm. That's what I wanted, because I know a lot of people are looking around and saying Ty Jerome is also in that contest as well. So,
Ty's certainly in that conversation for sixth man of the year. I'm curious to see how people are going to vote for that, considering there are 2 Cavs both in the running for sixth man of the year, where there's only like 1 Celtic, or there's only 1 Detroit Piston, or there's only 1 Minnesota Timberwolf. Right. It'll be interesting to see how they do that. But no, like DeAndre doesn't have to meet that threshold, because the truth is that there are only certain categories where the 65 or 62 with stipulations things come into play. And it's MVP, it's Defensive Player of the Year, it's Most Improved, it's All NBA, and it's all defense. It is not sixth man of the year.
And me and Jimmy did a whole nerdy podcast without Chris on it, so he didn't have to be on from the nerdiness on the CBA a couple of days ago. So if you want to get into why Most Improved is not an option for Ty Jerome, go into that and why.
Because that's the freaking rule. That's why. Because, just like there are certain streets that I think I should be able to drive 40 on, but guess what? I can't, because Bay Village tells me that the speed limit is 25 instead. So it doesn't matter what I think should be the case. There are rules in place, and we have to abide by them in life, just like there are rules in place in the NBA, and we have to abide by those when it comes to voting.
So if you want to go learn what the rules are for the end of season awards, go ahead and go listen to that podcast. And if you want to know who Chris is going to vote for, that's a podcast to come down the road after he submits his ballot, and we have that conversation on this podcast. So get ready for that. But with all that being said, that'll wrap up today's episode of the Wine and Gold Talk podcast. But remember to become a Cavs Insider and interact with Chris, me, Jimmy, and Ashley by subscribing to Subtext. This is where you can get direct information to your phone when it comes from us, and insight that does not always be readily available on the social media platforms. But to get all this information, sign up for a 14-day free trial or visit cleveland.com/Cavs and click on the blue bar at the top of the page. If you don't like it, that's fine. All you have to do is text the word STOP. It's easy, but we can tell you that the people who sign up stick around, because this is the best way to get insider coverage on the Cavs from me, Chris, Jimmy, and Ashley. This isn't just our podcast, it's your podcast. And the only way to have your voice heard is through Subtext. Y'all be safe. We out.